Thank you very much, Tone. Can I call you Tone? Has he mentioned my book? Oh, there's a picture of it there. I shall mention it once or twice as we go through. So what we'll do now is we'll turn my ugly mush off and we'll start on the webinar. Secret Underground London, that's what we've called it. As I said before, I didn't think it needed to be called Secret, but my publisher, Mr. McCamley, thought it ought to be. So that's why we called it Secret Underground London. This is part 2. We had part 1 a couple of months ago, and it is possible to do a part 3 if anyone requests it. I'm guessing you probably won't be, but anyway. So what is London? We went through that before. It's anything I want it to be, really. Roughly inside the M25, but if there's anything interesting outside the M25, and certainly in tonight's presentation there will be, then as far as I'm concerned, that's part of London. Right, so we dealt with closed underground stations, the so-called ghost stations, last time, of which there are quite a number, but what is almost equally as interesting is the parts of open stations that are now disused. A lot of stations had their original lifts replaced by escalators, so we've got disused corridors leading to lower lift landings, and they are almost as interesting as the stations that have closed down themselves. So before we get into another topic, we'll take a look at one or two of those. We're going to start off with Dover Street Station. It was opened on the 15th of December 1906 by the Great Northern, Piccadilly and Brompton Railway, and it was in Dover Street, which is just off Piccadilly, which wasn't a particularly convenient place for a station, and people didn't use it. It was rebuilt in 1933 with an escalator, access to the platforms, and a new entrance actually on Piccadilly. And that's how I saw the original entrance to Dover Street when I visited in 1968. If you look at the just to the left of the scaffolding, you can see the remains of the tiled entrance building. Long gone now, and that's the site now. But if you look to the left of the Clarence, there's that red tiling still there. So there is still a little bit of evidence of the original Dover Street entrance in Dover Street. But if you go down underground, there's plenty of evidence still to be found. The first part of the lower lift subway is used by the station's maintenance staff, and the cleaners have a little canteen in the subway. So you go through an innocuous door in the wall of the main entrance subway, and it brings you into the original subway to the lower lift landing, and that's where the cleaners now have their lunch, and they've got their lockers there as well. But if you go through a door at the end of that, you're actually into the original subway with the everything still in good condition. The lights are on, and everything, phones still work down there. It's in surprisingly good condition, actually. Clean that up and it could become almost usable again. Original signage still there to the trains, and if you go around the corner, you'll come to the lower lift landing. You'll see the lift landing is straight ahead, and you can see the two entrances on the left. And one of the lift shafts now houses a fan. Most of these original entrance shafts have been retained for ventilation. Sometimes you can still get in and out to the stations through the original entrance, but all the shafts have been retained, and they generally house a fan now, so it adds to the ventilation on the underground system. So we'll take a look at another one before we move on to another subject. The red arrow points to Hyde Park Corner, which is where we're going now. There's the original entrance to Hyde Park Corner Station. That's still there. It was Opened by the Great Northern Piccadilly and Brompton Railway in December 1906. And there's the station as it was a couple of years later. And there it is today. Still very recognisable for what it is. It's another of those marvellous Leslie Green designed stations. But our way in was not through. This is a hotel now, luxury hotel. But our way in was the door to the left of the central entrance, which doesn't lead into the hotel, but in fact leads to the top of the lift shaft. And I went there obviously with permission. All these visits are completely legal visits. And the doorman from the hotel came out and said, "What are you doing here? You're not allowed here. You can't go in there. You've parked in the wrong place." We parked on his front there. And of course we had all the necessary permission, and I obviously had someone from London Underground with the keys, and there's absolutely nothing he could do. He got very het up. He wanted to follow us down the stairs, but he was soon put in his place. And that's the top of the stairs. So everything again maintained. This is an emergency egress point. So this is kept in very good condition. All the lighting works, and they've even put a new handrail on as you go down the stairs. And then we get to the lower lift landing. If you compare it to Dover Street, which was a little bit grubby, this is swept certainly weekly, and they keep everything in very good condition. And there's the lower lift subway, which leads to the platforms. I think the entrance to this one was probably at the end of one of the platforms. And again, it's a door. It could be a door to anywhere, just to a maintenance cupboard or something. But a lot of these innocuous doors in the subways and on the platforms of open stations actually lead to disused parts of the station. So that's what we've got here at Hyde Park Corner. Again, remarkably good condition. Always nice to see that. And there's where it goes over. That's a bridge there over the line, and behind me will be the stairs down to the platform. Right, we took a look at some of the Camden Veer vaults and horse tunnels last time, but one particular thing that I didn't show you any pictures of, well, I'll show them now, simply because when the first presentation was prepared, I hadn't actually got in to one section of the horse tunnels. So my mouse seems to have disappeared. Let me just seem to find it. There we go. What we didn't get into is the stationary winding engine house, which worked trains up the incline from Euston to Camden Town. They were housed in a vault beneath the line, and that vault is still there. The main line into Euston actually runs under this grade 2 listed vault, so you can imagine trains thundering by every few minutes across the top of the vault. There's a plan of it, and there it is superimposed on the main line out of Euston Station. So literally everything does go right across it, and that's the engine room that had 2 Maudsley and Son and Field condensing beam steam engines. And the reason I didn't get down there before was because the engine house is totally flooded, not up to the roof, but it's flooded. You can see the tide mark high on the wall. So there's about 8 to 10 feet of water in there all the time. But it gets pumped out every 12 years or so, because they have to check that it is still in sound condition. So I managed to arrange a visit there during the pump out. We had to have a second go at it. The first time we were told to come along with a an orange high vis. It had to be orange because the railways don't use yellow. So we came in orange high vis and a helmet, and you go trackside you walk along the track and then nip over a fence, and you're down into the vault. So no problem at all. But it just happened to be the day when they had a health and safety inspection, and when their health and safety officer came along and saw that we weren't in full high vis, we were sent packing very quickly. If he told us we needed orange trousers as well, obviously we'd have brought our orange trousers. So a bit of embarrassment all round. So we re-equipped ourselves with orange trousers, went back a couple of weeks later, and were able to take a lot of photographs without any problems. That's the coal store. Again, you can see the tide mark on the wall. So virtually completely pumped out, and it really is an amazing place to get into. And parallel with the two coal stores are two vaults which housed the rope tightening mechanism. Again, the watermark there clearly visible on the walls. Right. So having finished with Camden, let's move on to the post office railway, or mail rail, which I'm sure a lot of you will have visited since it's been open to the public. That's what it looked like in 1927. It used to be very easy to get visits there, and these stopped, I think, in the 70s and 80s, and all no further visits were allowed. But when it was announced that the post office railway was going to close down, one of our members contacted them and said, "Could we have a final visit, please, for Subterranea Britannica?" And they relented. In fact, they had one day where they allowed a number of specialist groups in. So we did get one final chance to visit the post office railway before it closed down. There's the Mount Pleasant depot. If you've been on the new public tours, you will have been in there. In World War II, the tunnels were used to preserve artworks from the National Portrait Gallery and the Tate. And this is our visit. Can't remember the date. I think it was about 2003, and they had lots of things running. The service was still operating on a limited scale in those days, and we really got a chance to see mail rail running as it had been for many years, and everybody was very helpful, and they had one of the English electric battery locomotives on display for us. We went into the signal box at Mount Pleasant. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to walk along the track, so we didn't get the opportunity to walk up to the depot. That would have been nice, but at least we were able to see Mount Pleasant Station and the Post Office Railway in operation. We also looked at the new control room at Mount Pleasant, where after 1993, the control room I saw you a minute ago was between the platforms. So this one was elsewhere at Mount Pleasant, and the whole network was controlled from here. Having been mothballed in May 2003, Islington Council approved plans to open a part of it as a tourist attraction, and there's a plan of the depot and the route down to Mount Pleasant Station that it was proposed to open up to the public, and that's what was done. It's an artist's impression. Now, I haven't been there, so you can tell me if that looks anything like the scheme as we finally got it. But I gather it's been very popular, and I know Subbrit has had some special visits there, and I think we've probably got some more to come. So let's try something totally different now. This is Erith Underground Hospital at Erith, which is just inside the M25 near Dartford. An exercise in the men's surgery in October 1939. Now the hospital is still there because the bunker is still there. The underground hospital is still there because the bunker now use it as their X-ray department. So if you visit the Erith Cottage Hospital, as I believe it's now called, as you drive in the entrance, you will see the very clearly signed entrance to the field hospital, and that's what it looked like in 2000. During the war, men and women had their own entrances at either end of the bunker. Right, that's the field hospital at Erith. So let's take a look at some government and military headquarters. These should all be familiar names to you. Paddock, the standby cabinet war room. Station Zed, the standby air ministry war room. The Admiralty Citadel, which is the Horse Guards Parade. The Horse Ferry Rotundas, sadly now demolished. Wentworth. Now this is something quite interesting. I would guess not quite so familiar. GOC Home Forces headquarters, and something we did get into, but it was very difficult to take photographs that actually showed anything, was the London Region Home Defence Control Centre at South Kensington by the V&A. So I think I only got the one picture of that. So we'll start off with the Admiralty Citadel at Oxgate, which is at the corner of Oxgate Lane, fronting onto Edgware Road or whatever it's called at that point. It occupies the corner position, and it was originally the Admiralty Charts establishment. So the government had the land already, and they built the Oxgate bunker at an existing site. So that's what it looked like probably 20 years ago, and I'd imagine it probably hasn't changed much. When you get down into the bunker, you go down to the first level, much like Paddock, which I know a lot of you will have seen. Oxgate was a 2-level bunker. The first basement is used as a carpet warehouse, and from there are stairs down, an original spiral staircase still in place, or the main stairs down to the lower floor. When we first went there, it was completely flooded. The lower floor was flooded. You go to the top of the main stairs, and you go down the stairs, and you probably can't see it. It's quite dark in that picture, but there's a blast door at the bottom of the stairs, and the flood water comes to within a few inches of the top of the blast door. So everything, all of the sub basement was completely flooded. On the shelf above the stairs, you'll see some wooden crates. They're full of Sutcliffe and Speakman filters for the filtration system. Eventually, the water in the sub basement started rising, and the owners of the carpet warehouse on the basement above suddenly realized that the water was within inches of coming over the stairs and flooding their basement. So they said, well, we better do something about this, and they had the whole lot pumped out. If you have been to Paddock, you'll recognize the shapes of the pillars, because they really are very, very similar. Paddock is the same as this, but it still has all its partitions in and all the rooms in. We'll get some pictures of Paddock in a minute, and I'll show you that. But when they pumped it out, they very kindly invited us back and said, you can take whatever pictures you like now. And there's on the left one of the very rusty blast doors. At Paddock, all the blast doors have been taken out. But at Oxgate, the blast doors are still in there, but having been underwater for many years. They're in somewhat rusty condition. The generator has gone, unfortunately, but some of the control gear for the generator and the ventilation ducting is seen on the picture of the right on the right. That's the first basement, the upper floor. As you can see, very similar. You've got the same concrete pillars, ventilation trunking, and I suppose you'd never know. Anyone comes down to look at the carpets, and they wouldn't even know that they're on the upper level of a bunker. So we'll move on to Paddock now. I'm hoping that most of you will have been to Paddock. Sadly, Network Housing, who own the bunker, stopped visits a few years ago. We have been having meetings with them, and we are hopeful that these visits will be started again in the not too distant future. But unfortunately, our negotiations have been stalled by COVID. So once we finally get all that done and dusted and over with, then we are very hopeful of gaining access to Paddock once again and running the public open days. That's the anonymous single-story red brick office block that stood above the standby cabinet war room at Dollis Hill. The ventilation tower gives it away, but Paddock was always a three-story building, 1 story above ground and 2 stories below ground, built on the site. Once again, as with Oxgate, it was built on an existing site, the site of the post office research station. The paintwork is 1950s, so that is after the government had moved out. You'll notice a sign on the wall by the entrance halfway along the corridor that says to floor 28. I think it says. So that's pointing up to floor 28. So we're on floor 27 here, which is the upper spine corridor. Below that is floor 26, which is the sub basement. So that suggests that there might be another 25 floors below that. Sadly, no, Paddock wasn't anything like that. It was a rather strange numbering system that the GPO had in the 1950s. All the buildings were on their site. All the floors of all the buildings were all consecutively numbered. So this building happens to be floor 26, 27, and 28. Another building might have been 29, 30, 31, and so on. So sadly, no more than 2 floors below ground here. On the left, you'll see a little hatch. That's the serving hatch to the canteen. It's not really a canteen, just a kitchen, really. There was no canteen here. You ate your meals in the post office canteen above. But obviously, if the bunker was in lockdown, we've all been there, haven't we? If the bunker was in lockdown, you still need to be served some sort of refreshments. So there was a mightily small kitchen, and you'd queue up in the corridor, and you could get food and drink through the serving hatch. The map room on the lower floor of the bunker in April 2001. When I first went here, this was flooded to a depth of I don't know, about 2 feet. Nobody had been in the bunker for years. We found out that it was owned. It's called stadium housing in those days, and I approached them and said, "Look, we know you've got this bunker. Any chance we could visit and take some photographs and record it?" And they were surprisingly helpful. Health and safety didn't appear to be an issue. I wish we got that with a few other people. But all I had to do was just sign a bit of paper, which was not worth the paper I was signing, actually, saying that I took responsibility. And I picked up the keys from the local housing office. And they said, when you finish, just drop drop the keys through the letterbox when you go. So they were very trusting, gave us the keys, and we saw for the first time the wonder that is Paddock. And that's the same room on the day we went there, sort of totally flooded. The flooding was caused during the construction of the housing above in Brook Road, which is unfortunate. The contractors denied any knowledge of it, but it wasn't flooded before they started the work, and it was flooded after they finished building the housing. So it speaks for itself, really. But the water pours down the stairs from above the upper basement and finds its way down onto the lower floor. If you've ever been to the Cabinet War Room Museum and seen the map room there, then this room has the same function, with offices into adjacent rooms for those who needed to be to see the maps, which would have been on the walls, but didn't actually need to be on the rooms. If you look on the right, on the trunking, you can see some fluorescent light fittings, and if you look very carefully, you'll see the shades or the reflectors are actually angled. So they're angled, the fluorescent lights at the maps, which were on the walls. So I don't know when fluorescent lighting came along, but it was certainly around in the 1940s. I think we had probably 10 people on this visit. Most people came in waders. I think Paul Sowen, he didn't want to miss out, and he hadn't got any waders, so he just pulled his trousers up, and he was a sight, I'll tell you. And he made his way along there, but he did have his copy of the Times with him. There are 3 ways down. At either end, there's a spiral staircase. Then in the middle, there's the main stairway. A view down the spiral stairs at the south end of the bunker. This is now the emergency escape point. It's when we opened the bunker up to the public. You had to have 2 means of access. We had the main entrance, and we had the emergency exit, which was actually between 2 houses in Brook Road. So there was an extra bit of wall between 2 houses, and a metal door in the wall, and that was the emergency exit from the bunker. The generator room, after the flood water had been pumped out, it's a Crompton Parkinson, if I remember rightly, and it's not got many hours on the clock, but having been under a couple of feet of water for many years, not much chance of starting it up. The controls for it are in the cabinet on the left, and that's the air conditioning equipment on the upper floor. Again, everything, all the equipment that's remaining here is mainly plant, apart from one item which we'll see in a minute, and it all dates from 1939, when the bunker was built. This is the one piece of equipment that isn't plant. This is in the telephone exchange, and known to many BT people as a main distribution frame. A little bit of it is still there. There would have been probably 8 or 9 of these along the full length of the room. Dust covers covering relays. I thought they were switches, but I was told that they were relays. But one of particular interest has on it CWR, Cabinet War Room. Well, I don't know, but what else does CWR stand for? So what we think is this is a set of relays down to the cabinet war room. The actual war room itself was immediately below the telephone exchange. Paddock has been used for a number of films, mainly documentaries, but a number of dramas as well. And one that I particularly liked, because they employed me for 10 days to be a caretaker, and the BBC pay very well, I'll tell you that. BBC Three made this drama. It's called The Fades, and they brought a lot of wartime equipment, and Paddock once again became a wartime bunker, and it really looked the part. I'll tell you, it really looked the part. You can find it on YouTube. I can't remember which episode it is that features Paddock, but there's quite a lot of interesting things. There's a firefight down there where a non-being is finally put to her death, having been tied to the main distribution frame. But it's entertaining. Not only has it been used for documentaries and dramas, but it's also been used for pop videos, and we see one of them being filmed here. I was actually approached by the management of the Prodigy Fire Eater, and they wanted to drive a bus along the main corridor there. And I said, well, there's no way you can get a bus in there. But they said, well, we'll come and look anyway. We may be able to sort of not actually get the bus in there, but build something in there. So the Prodigy and their management all came along, and they toured the bunker, and they loved it. But in the end, they decided they weren't able to use it, which is a shame. But we did have this guy here. This is Dirty, D-U-R-T-Y, Goods, G-U-D-Z or something like that. And he's a grime rapper. Now, is anyone into grime rap? I can see all your hands going up. But he's actually a nice guy. But again, you'll find his video is "Oi, what you're looking at." You'll find that on YouTube, and it was done partly at Paddock and partly at Charing Cross Station, where I arranged access there to some of the service tunnels. But it just shows a lot of people wanted to film at Paddock. They all had to pay. Network weren't going to let them in for nothing. But it was interesting experience being with all the various film crews. When they actually wanted to have a drone at Paddock, they did have a drone in there, but it was a drone simulator. He had the cameraman had the camera fixed to his chest on something that vibrated as if it was actually a drone flying along. So it was a bit of a swizz. Right, so let's take a look at the third of the big London war rooms, which is Station Z. Same thing again, the same pillars, same layout as Paddock and Oxgate. All three of them were very, very similar. And there's an aerial view of Station Z, the open quadrangle enclosed by a three-story office block, and you can see the radio mast there. This is at Harrow, the Kodak factory at Harrow, and this is what it looked like on the surface before the office block was demolished. The mast is there, the ventilation towers are there. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see it in that state. By the time I got there, all the surface buildings had been pulled down, and it was just waste ground. But when you get down below, once again, you're in the bunker. This is looking down from the upper floor plant access loading bay into the main area of the bunker. I got my visit in 2005. Kodak had been they've been saying no for years, but eventually someone quite high up in Kodak came on one of the Paddock open days and he was so impressed. He said, "We've got one of these. Would you like a visit?" So miraculously, everything got sorted out very quickly. There's a very interesting on the main stairs between the two floors. There's it could almost be described as a narrow gauge tramway for moving material between the floors. Note the trough rails mounted on the stairs between the upper, lower floor, and a specially adapted truck with a triangular framework, which you'll see on the right is still there. This allows the platform to remain horizontal on the incline, and that was used to winch goods and documents between the floors. That's the air conditioning plant. Everything was stripped out at Station Z, which was a shame. There was virtually nothing to be seen other than engine beds, no engines at all. But again, you see the same concrete pillars as we saw at Oxgate and at Paddock. It had been flooded to a much higher level, but the water level was eventually the water was pumped out. So although there's water on the floor, it was only a few inches, so we were able to walk around everywhere. And Kodak were very helpful on this occasion. They let us in and left us to it, and said we'll come back in a couple of hours and see if you're finished. The Admiralty Citadel now. This was described by Prime Minister Winston Churchill as a vast monstrosity which weighs upon the Horse Guard Parade. Now, if you've been to London, you've been to Horse Guards Parade. I'm sure you'll have seen this building. Have a look on the right-hand corner of the building where it butts onto the old building. You can see a pillbox. Not been able to get into this. We have tried. We did find the door open once and walked in, but didn't get very far once inside. But still there. Still worth seeing if you're in London. Anson. Paddock wasn't very popular with anyone, in particular Churchill. Churchill never wanted to go there. He described it in his memoirs as, I'm not going to do the voice, but far from the light of day. He didn't even accurately remember where it was, because he said it was somewhere near Hampstead, which of course it wasn't that near Hampstead. So Paddock only remained in use for a few years, and by the time Paddock opened, its replacement, Anson, was already under construction in Southwest One. Churchill didn't want to move away from Southwest One, so the new site at the Rotundas, which was a pair of disused gas holders, was selected, and two massive 600-room bunkers of 3 stories each was built in the two massive circular holes left after the removal of the gas holders, and one of these housed Anson, the replacement for Paddock, in the North Rotunda. That's what it was like when I first visited. That's the upper story of the South Rotunda. The building above it is a Home Office office block, which by that time was condemned. It had concrete cancer. When it was first erected, I think it was the tallest building in London, but it was eventually condemned and had to come down. It was built on top of the two rotundas. In fact, the rotundas were 3 bunkers. They were the North Rotunda, the South Rotunda, and between them something that was called the steel framed building. If you go into the rotundas, the curved passageway known as the Crescent clearly shows the circular shape of the buildings. Large wall-mounted world map, survivor from the 1980s, when the building was in use as a naval comms centre. It was certainly still used. It was used in the Falklands, and I think it was used in Bosnia, but much after that, it was taken out of use. But some of the maps were still in place. I think it was glued there, and they couldn't get it off. Now, this is quite interesting. That's the entrance blast door to the North Rotunda on the left. The picture on the right is the corridor linking the steel-framed building. So that's a third bunker between the two rotundas. So it's linking the steel-framed building with the South Rotunda. The distortion to the ceiling and right-hand wall, you can clearly see the right-hand wall sort of bowing outwards and the ceiling is coming downwards. That was created by a near miss from a V1 flying bomb. So it caused some damage, but it didn't actually manage to penetrate the bunker itself. Heating plant in the basement of the South Rotunda. I don't think it was still working at this time, but everything was in good condition. They had to go, unfortunately. Once the office block was demolished, demolition was underway in 2002. I don't think the demolition contractor realized just how difficult it was going to be to demolish. He tried explosives, which got him nowhere. So eventually they just had to pick away at it until the whole thing had gone. They didn't obviously remove the lower floors. They just tipped everything from the upper floors into the lower floors, and that was good. But what they did retain, I can't tell you much about this because it's still top secret, but there was a stairway from the rotundas leading down to the deep level cable tunnels, to say it quietly. And when the rotundas were being demolished, they had to maintain access to the deep level cable tunnels. We just wandered across, and we thought, wonder if the door is open, but there was a man there making sure that nobody ventured any further. Bob Jenner took these aerial pictures. He just went around all the office blocks around the site, just asking if he could go up to their top floor and take pictures of the demolition site, and virtually everyone said yes. So he went several times and got views in various stages of demolition. That's a little bit later, where they're getting there. It took them a long time to get there, but they are in this view in March 2003. They were getting there. It took many months to complete. Now all trace has gone, but of course there is still access to the deep level cable tunnels. Right, now this is outside the M25. I do apologise, but I don't care. It's my webinar, and I think this is a particularly interesting set of tunnels. The Wentworth bunker, which is on Wentworth Golf Course. And the interesting thing here is the construction was almost entirely made out of London Transport tube linings, which have been used in one or two places. If anyone's been to the bunker at Barnton Quarry, you will know there that tube linings were used for the tunnel from the entrance into the bunker itself. And we had a trip to the Portland Rota bunker a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, and again tube linings were used there. So it's quite a rarity, but this bunker was open for many years. If you asked, nobody would let you in, But if you ask someone a little bit lower down, not the general manager of the golf course, if you just ask a cleaner or something, he said, yes, I'll show you where it is. And we were able to get in. And there you go. The airlock at the east end of the bunker, where the central corridor joins the emergency escape passage, the site of the airlock anyway. There's not a lot to see down there. You've got the tube linings, you've got the tunnels, and that's about it. There's no equipment left in there. But it really does look like a tube tunnel. That's the now demolished emergency exit, which stood beside the drive up to the clubhouse. Sadly, that went quite a long time ago. Now the London Region Home Defence Centre at South Kensington. So this was all the bunkers for in the boroughs in London during the war. They reported to the London Region Home Defence Centre at South Kensington, adjacent to the V&A. That's the map room. The building is still there, but the Natural History Museum now use it as a store, and it is so crammed full of movable shelving that there's virtually nothing to be seen now. And that's what it looks like if you go into the bunker. The structure is still there, the bunker is still there, but they've built all this shelving within the rooms in there that you don't really get an idea of what it had been like. It was hardly worth taking any more pictures than that, and I don't think I did. Let's go back to railways for a while. Snow Hill Station and connections. Now, Snow Hill was on the link between the Widen lines at Farringdon and Blackfriars, and it had two names: Snow Hill or Holborn Viaduct Low Level. So it was the next station after Ludgate Hill. It was between Ludgate Hill and Farringdon, below Holborn Viaduct. It's a station I always wanted to get into, and was unable to for a long time. But eventually the line was closed and the track was lifted, and this was what it looked like in 1985, 14 years after the rails were lifted. Holborn Viaduct is up above. You can see where the fencing is. That's the line into Holborn Viaduct, which was still open at that time. But this line here dives deep under Holborn to join the Widen lines at Farringdon. So finally managed to get in there in 1985. And to my surprise, Snow Hill Station, which was renamed Holborn Viaduct Low Level in 1912, was still there. The derelict platforms were still there, and remained for a number of years. I went there a couple of times. My last visit were with the contractors who were working on rebuilding the line, and I think we've got some pictures of that in a minute. There's a station seat still in place in an alcove on the northbound platform. Just to one side of this, there's a spiral staircase which leads up to Snow Hill, and there is still one of these nondescript doors in Snow Hill, but clearly a door that is very heavily alarmed. It's got a push bar on one side, so you can push the bar and you're out onto Snow Hill, but no way of opening it from the Snow Hill side. But that leads down onto the Snow Hill platform. And this is what it looked like in 1986 after the track had been relaid. Snow Hill Tunnel was reopened in 1988 as part of the new Thames Link network, which came into service in May 1990. But the platforms are still there, and that bench seat in the alcove is almost certainly still there. So if you go through the tunnel, if you're going north on one of the Bedford trains, you will go through Snow Hill Station and probably completely miss it as you go through. Now, quite a lot of goods yards were underground. Some were later converted into underground car parks. Most have gone. This is the Great Northern Railway's Farringdon Street goods depot in April 1981. This time, part of it was a car park, but if you went through a door at the back of the car park, you actually found yourself in the old goods depot with the track still laid on the cobbles. More railway tunnels. Park Hill Tunnel, or Park Hill Tunnels, as it should really be known. It consists of 3 tunnels on the Woodside and South Croydon Railway. Because of the nature of the ground, it was necessary to construct the middle section by cut and cover. So there are actually 3 tunnels. Of course, that is now the tramway, but this line was eventually closed. Closed because they knew the tramway was coming, and we had several opportunities to visit the tunnels. And that's it was closed 16th of May 1983. The track through the tunnels was lifted by the end of the year. Ballast is still there, and we had a couple of trips, authorised trips again, I must add. Always believe in doing things the right way, through the tunnels, and photographic trips, and we got some good views. That's inside Coombe Lane Tunnel, looking north towards Park Hill Tunnel. So I'm under here, the cut and cover section, and beyond it was the tunnel section. So you've got 2 tunnels and a cut and cover section between them. That's the 4 years after closure. Nature was certainly beginning to take over by that time, but it wasn't going to be for long, because that's what it looks like today. So the first Croydon tram link route to New Addington opened 10th of June 2000, and that included a revamped Park Hill Tunnel. So if you take a tram journey today, you get to go through the Park Hill tunnels. Right, now I'm not going to read all that, but if you watch it on YouTube, you can see we're going to be looking at the system of hydraulic distribution pipes that ran between London in Victorian times, and a lot of buildings were operated by hydraulic power, and a lot of the pipes were housed in tunnels, which are incredibly difficult to get into, and there is one of them. This power tunnel is a massive service tunnel beneath Rosebery Avenue, and Roger Morgan was able to arrange access. We've tried since, and there's still quite a few of these tunnels around, but most of them involve going down a manhole. This one was accessed through a door in the wall, and that they really are massive feats of engineering, marvelous tunnels. But sadly, it's going to be something that nobody is going to be seeing, because a lot of them now house that they're all used for as service tunnels, housing electrical cables. The hydraulic pipes have now gone, but we were very pleased to get into one of these on a mid-1990s sub-Brit study weekend. So we do get into some interesting places, and then another view in the tunnel under Rosebery Avenue. Right, what are we going to look at now? Deep level air raid shelters in London. These existed on the Northern Line and the Central Line, and they were intended as high-speed lines that would have they were planned and started before the war, but if they'd been completed, they would have provided an express service, not stopping at all the stations. So an express service on the Northern Line and the Central Line. There's a list of the ones that were planned. Clapham South, Clapham North, Clapham Common, Stockwell, all still there. You can see them. Oval was never finished. Goodge Street and Camden Town and Belsize Park, all still there. St Paul's not finished. The Chancery Lane, that's actually the most interesting one, because that became the Kingsway telephone exchange in the Cold War. So that had a very interesting life. So we'll take a look into some of the deep level shelters now. Not sure where we're going to starting. That's a plan. It's they all look fairly much the same. 2 pillboxes on the surface, leading with a lift shaft down to 2 parallel tunnels. In this case, above the tube tunnel. I don't think that was always the case. And the tunnels were actually built on 2 levels. So each of the shelter tunnels had an upper and a lower floor. So that's what they all roughly look like. Here's a plan of the one at Clapham South, probably the best preserved one. There's the north entrance of on the corner of Clapham Common, probably taken in July 1944, shortly before the shelter opened. If you go along Clapham Common today, you'll see the building as clear as day. All the ventilation has been taken out, but the circular pillbox or entrance building is still there. And just to the left of it, where the entrance sign is, there is an interpretation panel supplied. Well, it was paid for by Lambeth Council, but it was Sub-Brit provided all the photos and all the text for it. So it's got a big plaque advert for Sub-Brit on it. So if you go along to the site today, you'll be able to see some old pictures, and that's something we're quite proud of. We did help at a number of sites with interpretation boards, and this is what it looks like today. So not really that different. I think it's probably the best preserved, and there is our interpretation panel. So, as I said, paid for by Lambeth Council, but you will see the Sub-Brit logo at the bottom on the left. So, obviously, I would guess most of the local people knew what it was, but it's nice to have a brief history of the shelter for anyone to read as they go by. That was the north entrance. This was the south entrance to the Clapham South shelter in 2008. The single-story admin block was where all the tickets for the whole shelter network were printed. And all the maintenance staff would have been housed here for all the shelters. That's all gone, and they've built flats there, and rather grotesquely, they've built the flats across the top of the entrance roundhouse. I think that looks hideous, but at least the thing's still there, and there is still access, and it is listed. It's grade 2 listed, and it is by far the best preserved of the deep level shelters. Plenty of pictures of the shelter in use during the war. Lots of signage, and the good thing is virtually all the signage is still there. That's the warden's room. The warden's room is still there. So everything is, once you get down there, everything is recognizable. But these pictures are quite important. The end of the war, London had a severe labour shortage, and the Colonial Office sought to recruit a labour force from the Britain's colonies. As a result, the Empire Windrush arrived at Tilbury in 1948, carrying 492 worker migrants from Jamaica who were housed in the shelters. Now, the man on the picture top left, I think is the man putting his tie on. His daughter contacted us, probably about 15 years now, saying that she wanted to make up a presentation for her father on his, I can't remember which birthday it was. So we were able to supply one of these pictures of him in a frame, which he was absolutely delighted with. It's what Sudbury's all about, in my view. But that's just a marvelous feeling to be able to do that. So what do they look like when you actually get down there today? Well, the Clapham South shelter, all the plant is still intact. We've got the main transformer there for operating the lifts. It needed to be rectified, and that thing in the cabinet on the right is a mercury vapor rectifier. Marvelous contraption. And as I said, all the signage is still there. You really get the feeling for being in a shelter. A lot of the bunks are still there as well, but at Clapham South they've been reused, repurposed as shelving, and they're not always recognizable for what they were. So we'll take a look at Clapham Common. That's the Clapham Common entrance, located on Clapham High Street at its junction with Carpenter's Place. That was leased to Security Archives, or Recall as they became, for many years, but there was a break-in. Urban explorers, they didn't manage to get in, but they did force they got in on the top floor. So Recall moved out, and it was empty for a while, but then it found a new use, which is quite interesting. That's the south entrance, the junction of Clapham High Street and Clapham Park Road. It didn't find the reuse immediately. Clapham North was given the reuse first, and the problem with Clapham North is that although it had a lift shaft, there'd never been a lift in it, so it was always going to be a difficult shelter to rent out to anyone, and so while a lot of the other shelters were used for archive storage, Clapham North was never used by anyone. There's the lift shaft without a lift in it. It gives you a good example of the construction of the deep level shelters. That's the upper level with stairs down to the lower level, and the lower level, all very clean and tidy. And all the plant has generally been cleared, which is unfortunate. That's where the toilets, top left, is where the toilets would have been, but all that's been taken out. The bottom of the Bedford Road ventilation shaft, again, virtually everything taken out and not much to be seen. So how about this new use? Well, having remained empty because there were no lifts. Oh yes, sorry, I got that wrong. They were removed in the 1980s and 90s, which is why they couldn't rent it out to an archive storage company. Clapham North found a new tenant in January 2014 when West Country farmers Richard Ballard and Stephen Dring signed a 25-year lease on the bunker for growing vegetables. I think London Transport were very pleased to get it off their hands. So I think the first 5 years of the lease was going to be free, and they promised to pay for the installation of new lifts. So the underground farm was set up. Two-star Michelin chef Michel Roux Jr., who lives in Clapham, close to the shelter, joined the team and was very impressed when he actually saw what could be produced there. I need to get rid of something that's appeared on my screen. I do apologize. Right, we can move on now. And here's some samples of Growing Underground is the name of the company. Thai basil, growing underground. It's not cheap, but it is grown underground, and it is very good quality. Eventually, they moved out of Clapham North because London Transport decided they weren't going to pay for the lifts, but they did offer them Clapham Common instead, which had working lifts once Recall had moved out, which is where they are now. So we'll move on to the Stockwell shelter, seen here in July 1944, just after it opened, and there's what it looks like today. I think that's actually quite nice. What local people have done there. It's right in the middle of a big road junction, so everyone passing sees it. If you actually walk around it, you get a little story there, and I think they've done a nice job there. That's the other entrance. Again, at this time, it was being used by Recall, the entrance in Studley Road. They didn't want to know us. We tried to get visits down there, but they didn't want to know. Goodge Street, deep level tunnels at Goodge Street have been particularly interesting history because during the war they were equipped as General Eisenhower's headquarters. And since then, they have been used as an army transit camp until a serious fire closed the camp on the night of 21st of May 1956. And again, more recently, that has been used for archive storage. They did let Blue Peter into there, and they let them film in there, but any influence I had did nothing there, and they didn't want to know. But a lot of you will probably have seen the east entrance to the Goodge Street shelter in Cheney Street, still there, and that's the western entrance to the shelter in Goodge Street. The telephone switchboard in Eisenhower's command centre at Goodge Street, and a few pictures taken underground during the war at Goodge Street. Chancery Lane. Now, this was the interesting one because it was never actually used as an air raid shelter. Initially, it was used as a troop hostel, and in January 1944, half the space was to be operational staff for the London Civil Defence region. But it's what happened to it after the war that became interesting, because you can see the original shelter tunnels on the left, and all this was added below it when it was used to house a massive underground telephone exchange, Kingsway Telephone Exchange, during the Cold War. And there's
construction pictures from 1952, while the original shelter was being extended to house the new telephone exchange. Connection between Kingsway Exchange and the Whitehall tunnels in 1995. And we mustn't talk about that. That tunnel has been now totally filled with concrete because 10, 15 years ago, they were trying to find a buyer for these tunnels, and it was absolutely imperative that nobody would ever be able to reach the deep level cable tunnels. So the the way through, the link between Kingsway Exchange and the cable tunnels was filled with concrete, and there it is. Shortly before it was filled, behind me there's a door into the deep level cable tunnels, and straight ahead we're in the Kingsway telephone exchange. So that now has completely gone. A trunk test suite in South Street East in 1968 during its life as the Kingsway telephone exchange. Chancery Lane Station was the original entrance, and the lower part of that building is a closed entrance to Chancery Lane Station, and the entrance to the telephone exchange was through the glass doors to the left. Again, no one was supposed to know it was there. But if you went round the corner into Fernville Street, it was a little bit more obvious because that was the goods entrance, and there was a massive, great hoist there for bringing in heavy equipment. If you go through the double doors, you're onto the main goods lift, and equipment could be taken down. And there's a massive ventilation shaft there. Round the corner was a second pedestrian entrance in Tooks Court off Fernville Street. Ventilation towers there, but sadly that was demolished many years ago. So we go down downstairs, down from the Chancery Lane entrance. They put in a new entrance since refurbishing the Chancery Lane Station building. They excavated a new entrance around the corner. Another of these nondescript doors. Tony said, I've only got 15 minutes left. My goodness, I'm at 143 out of 194. I don't think we're going to get through all these slides, but anyway, so we go into this new side door, and we're at the upper, the top of the lift, down into the Kingsway telephone exchange. So we'll take a look at quickly at some of the pictures on the upper floor of the exchange. It's a marvelous place to visit. Recreation room and bar with distinctive 1970s color scheme. The kitchen adjacent to the main dining room with serving hatches visible on the left. Everything is still in there. That's the dining room, once again retaining all its 1970s decor. Under emergency conditions, the full 1.5 megawatt load of the Kingsway Exchange could be met by its own underground power station. And there's all the equipment to run the exchange. And it's still there. The main distribution frame, all incoming and outgoing cables serving Kingsway terminate on this frame and are jumpered from here to the relevant exchange apparatus. I think the first time I went there, it was still live. Or there were certainly still some live circuits on it. And that's what it used to look like in the 60s. So it hasn't really changed that much. When you get a chance to watch the YouTube, have a look at the plan of it, where you can see the names of all the roads. This is one of the new tunnels that were put in when the original shelter tunnels were enlarged for Cold War use. On the right, there's steps down, go below the tunnels, and you can get up under the tunnels and come out at the other side. This is quite interesting. When it was built as a shelter, access was going to be from Chancery Lane Station. So they put in a lift shaft from, most of the shelters had stairs, but Chancery Lane was a little bit further. I think it was about 60 feet below the shelter and the station. So they put in a lift shaft, and you've got one of those nondescript doors along the platform at Chancery Lane, which actually takes you to the upper lift landing, and this is looking up the lift shaft from the exchange below. Now, when I wanted to visit, the post office were helpful, but they wanted to do it in conjunction with something else. They didn't want to. They weren't prepared to pay for the staff to come along just to let a handful of us in for a visit. So we knew that Griff Rhys-Jones was making a series of programs on various towns. I think there was Paris and London, and he was very keen to get into the Kingsway Exchange. So I arranged for the TV company who paid to go into Kingsway Exchange. They wanted to abseil in. They wanted Griff to abseil in. Obviously, there's nowhere at the Kingsway Exchange where you can abseil in. So we arranged for them to abseil down a vent shaft at Charing Cross Station, and then suddenly emerge in the Kingsway Exchange. It's called artistic license, but it was acceptable to everyone. Griff had never abseiled before, but London Underground at Charing Cross Station were happy that he brought along the right equipment and the right team to make sure he was doing it the right way, and they were quite happy to let him get on with it. So there he is. I've done it. I couldn't do it. No, I never enjoyed it. Abseiling down one of these ventilation shafts at Charing Cross Station, and then he emerged in the Kingsway Telephone Exchange, where there was a bicycle waiting for him to cycle around the exchange. There's a very brief history of Bishopsgate Goods Station, but I would like to show you, if I've got a bit of time, a few pictures of Bishopsgate Goods Station. You'll have to look at the map when you go to the YouTube. Some pictures of Bishopsgate Goods Yard in the 1930s. It was one of many huge goods depots all over London, massive places. Burnt down on the 5th of December 1964, and a lot of it has been there in a very derelict state for many years. That's one of the hydraulic lifts from the upper level down to the depths of the goods yard below, and I'm quite proud of this picture. It took a long time to do the exposure. The lower rail level at Bishopsgate in 1995. There's a big turntable pit on the right, and daylight streams through one of those apertures. You saw that hydraulic lift, the wagon hoists, and there were 3 of those, so the daylight still comes through. That's how we actually got in there, down one of the wagon hoists. We put a ladder down the wagon hoist and got into the what's below it. Unknown high room accessed from the outer roadway running between Wheeler Street and Brick Lane. We don't know what all the rooms were. The stairs were wooden and rotten, but they took my weight, so that was all right. Now, I've mentioned hydraulic hydraulic powered equipment. One of the depot's 2 hydraulic accumulators. The scale of the cylinder may be judged by the side of the discarded pallets. That's huge, and I had to come down one of those wooden stairways. And as I was climbing down the stairs, there was a lot of rustling noise. And as I got closer, I could see a lot of movement, and it was teeming with rats. As I got closer to the pallets and landed on the pallets, they went scurrying in all directions. So I just took my chance down there and grabbed some pictures quite quickly. But as far as I know, that's still there. But what saved the structure is the distinctive pointed arches of the office area on the lower rail level, the Braithwaite Viaduct. So these are listed, and it's so although a lot of the goods yard and the viaduct above it have been demolished, especially when they put the new line in, some parts have been retained, and these wonderful Braithwaite arches are still there. Something I found very interesting down in the, I think it was in the sub-basement, was these decaying shelves containing Great Eastern Railway personnel files, many dating back to 1915. I took a couple. I sent one to the Great Eastern Railway Society and one to the Greater London Industrial Archaeology Society, and said, look, guys, something has got to be done. I know there are only personnel records, but it would be a tragedy if all these were lost. And as far as I know, they did eventually get taken out. But whether anyone will spend time going through them, I don't know. This is a nice little, more the picture on the right. It's a small restroom in the basement storerooms between the lower rail level, between Wheeler Street and Brick Lane. And the storeman would have sat there. On the wall, there's a picture of the Queen, and he would have had his breaks in that little restroom. Fascinating piece of social history. Position of 2 turntables serving transverse lines, which ran the full width of the western end of the lower rail level. This is all in pitch darkness, so that there is no light down here. So all these are lit with flash. Some of this is still there, some of it has gone. Again, looking through the arches between the various tracks. One of the turntables still in place, and you can actually get down into that and see all the mechanism. Again, looking a general view along the lower rail level at Bishopsgate goods station. 5 minutes, Tony, he says. So I'm going to have to round out. Let's just see if we can get through 100. There's 20 more of these pictures. Godstone quarries. I'm going to show you a few underground quarries. Then if we do have a part 3, then I'll get into quarries more seriously, because I think these are fascinating places. Mushroom cultivation was begun in Arch Quarry, Godstone, around 1905, but not very successful. The photograph shows some of the surviving beds of mushroom compost in Arch Quarry. Timber props in Arch Quarry, probably dating from the time the workings were used. This is Carthorse Quarry, which was occupied by a number of London wine and spirit merchants during the war, and they left quite a lot of their graffiti there. So that can be visited. Some of these quarries can be visited, others can't. Most of them had horizontal adits, but all but one horizontal adit has now gone. This is the remaining horizontal adit entrance to Godstone Hill Quarry. That's now I think it's still there, and you can get into that. What's quite interesting is they utilised the old plates from the Croydon, Merstham and Gosden Railway, and you can see the plate way still in situ in the quarry. Also, there's a narrow gauge tramway as well. So the plates came first, and then the narrow gauge rails were added later. A lot of rectangular pit props are still in place. These date from the period of mushroom cultivation, and they seem, if you touch one with your hand, your finger goes straight into it. So they're not really holding up anything now. So it's relatively stable down there. Again, that area of the quarry floods sometimes. You can see the flood water. That's looking north. The quarry did go a lot further than that, but at where the floodwaters have come to, most of the roofs have come down. There's a lot of propping. Sometimes the roofs come down between the props, but sometimes you can climb over it. This is Marden Quarry. The original entrance was filled in, but in the 1980s, the landowner put in a new pipe to give access. And again, we've got lots of parallel galleries, tramways still in place, lots of pit props, and more evidence of use during World War II, when the quarry was used as a bonded warehouse. You've got a strong room there with a grilled door. Bottom left, this is a grilled door into one side of it, and on the other side there was a metal door with the Shellmex 1 and 5p enamel panel over the door. So that could all be visited. Television presenter Michael Burke stands outside the entrance to Winders Hill Quarry in 1994 during a filming of a sequence for the documentary series 999. This is the only walk-in quarry entrance at Gosden where you can actually still walk in to something, but sadly it doesn't lead very far. We're running out of time. James, if you want a part 3, tell the gaffer, Mr. Radston, that you want a part 3, and we'll see if we can do that, because there's an awful lot of really good quarry pictures to come, because we haven't got into the main workings yet. So we just take a couple of looks more at Winders Hill. There are 11 miles of accessible quarries at Shoulden Bottom to the west of Merstham, but I'm afraid they're all going to have to wait till next time, because we have finished. I'm afraid we finally got through nearly 200 slides. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to put the camera on again, mainly so I can show you my book. Have you heard of it? Secret Underground London. More Books has a number of copies, and if you look in the chat section, you'll find ways of contacting More Books, and he will gladly sell you some copies of the book. I hope you've enjoyed my second webinar. If you want a third one, there's a lot more of London we haven't seen yet, so believe me, we could actually go on to a fourth one as well, but stop at 3 for now, and I'd be happy to carry on. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Are there any questions I could answer? Have I got any more time?
Yeah, you got to go. Yeah, another 5 minutes or so.
Right. Let's have a look at some of these questions.
Anyway, we will get Nick back to kick off our autumn season sometime in September.
Oh, well. If you want me to have another go, then I don't mind doing it. Anson had a BBC store. Did it have an acoustically treated studio? Not that we ever saw. We saw BBC studios at obviously a lot of the Cold War bunkers, and I've certainly seen there was a BBC studio at Drakelow, World War II studio at Drakelow, but I saw no evidence at the Rotundas, simply because they were in continuous use until the 90s. So if there had been anything there, I think it was stripped out, and there was certainly nothing we could see. The place is massive, so we couldn't actually spend. We only had a couple of hours there to look at only one of the rotundas and the steel frame building, so we didn't even get a chance to see all the site. And with 600 rooms per rotunda, you're only getting a glance of it. So we could have easily missed something, but they were just such hard sites to get into, and we did our best. David Ferris, thanks for a great night, great talk, Nick. Goose Street Shelter has a connection down to the deeper post office level tunnels. That wouldn't surprise me. As I said, I'd have to ask Blue Peter. I was promised a couple of times that they would give access, but Security Archives access didn't like sub-writ for some reason. So I couldn't go in as sub-writ, so I tried just under my own name, but I think they probably knew who I was, so they weren't going to be helpful at all. As I said, they got broken into in the end. The Urban Explorers got into the Clapham Common one, and they got in quite cleverly, but they didn't actually get into anything that mattered. But so then Recall actually gave up all the shelters. Recently, they've given the company, can't remember the name of the company that was in Belsize Park, have given that up as well. So at the moment, Belsize Park shelter is empty, and it still has a lot of its bunks still in place. So if it may be possible to arrange access to that, I don't know, but perhaps someone on the committee can look into getting access there, because it would be the right time to do it with the end of lockdown and opening up. Iron Mountain are not helpful at all, David. They're an American company, and Iron Mountain have also got the Sopley rotor bunker, and I got into Sopley with the previous people, but when I went down there with Iron Mountain, we knocked on the door, and they just did not want to know, weren't at all helpful. So anything to do with Iron Mountain, probably not worth bothering with at all. So we did try. Thank you, Steve. I hope you've enjoyed it. So I'm going to finish now because I'm late for my dinner, supper, whatever you call it. So thanks for joining me on another webinar, and I'll see you in September.
Thanks very much, Nick. We all enjoyed it.
Pleasure.